Hello, everyone, and good morning from a very grey London. Very pleased to be here today for the closing session of this event. I think usually in physical events, this will be the session that stands between people and a refreshing beverage or food of some sort. So perhaps it's one advantage to being online. It's probably a little bit early in the day to be supporting Europe's wine industry. However, I hope some of you at least have a very nice cup of tea or coffee in front of you. So I'm Linda Griffin. I run global public policy for King. It's a European founded games developer, and I'm also co-founder of the European Tech Alliance. It's my very great pleasure to introduce André Azevedo, the first Portuguese Secretary of State for Digital Transformation. You're very welcome, Mr. Secretary, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Hello, Linda, from this very sunny Lisbon. Yeah, as you can see, we have to cover the windows because it's the sun outside. It's amazing today.
That's a good problem to have, and we will definitely get to that. So look, let's dive in. Before we look ahead at Portugal's presidency, I'd like to hear about recent developments in country. In Europe, we try very hard to be the sum of our parts, but I think in terms of the digital market, we are still very much the individual parts of that sum. Our approaches and rules, as we've seen at this event, vary greatly across the EU. So like yourself, I am from a small state that has seen strong per capita growth in terms of the digital sector, from promoting our own startups to attracting regional and international investment. But it's easy to say we're a small country, we can be nimble, we can do things bigger countries can't. What makes Portugal unique from other member states? What is it that you're doing differently, you think, in terms of growing the digital economy?
Well, thanks for that question. We truly believe we have a different approach to digital, and above all, we have a very clear political priority to digital, just like Ireland also and other countries in the European Union. But in our case, it's pretty clear. We have created for the first time, as you have mentioned, Secretary of State for the digital transition, which shows that this is one of the top priorities of our government, and it didn't start 1 year ago, it started, in fact, several years ago. We have a new action plan for digital transition, which is aimed to congregate all the initiatives and articulate all the different initiatives that we want to promote to be consequent and intentional in terms of digital agenda. We have created a new mission unit to coordinate this action plan, and we have strong public and European investment on digital initiatives, pretty much aligned also with the European top priorities. But above all, I would emphasize this holistic approach to digital. I think it's also relevant the scale of our country. We have probably the right dimension. It's something that many of the international companies and investors mention in the case when they decide to go for Portugal. They basically emphasize the right dimension to test, to experiment, to work as a test balloon for new concepts, and this before they sometimes make the rollout for the world. It's also important to emphasize our stability. We have a pretty much stable democracy with a government that's been able to complete the 4 years mandate for several years, and this is something that is also reflected at the social, economic, political level. As you know, we have also this very important tourism hype before the pandemic arrives, but in fact this was something that put us on the map and became all the eyes, and many investors visited us, and they had the privilege of having and taking direct contact with this reality. And I would also emphasize that we started this journey 10 years ago. In fact, we didn't start it 2 years or 3 years ago. We started a long time ago. And the consistency of investing in this area, believing that we need startups ecosystem to promote and invest on R&D to make a transition in our economic model was very, very important. And we have several successful programs that we have also initiated in Portugal, being the first one, the Startup Visa, which is aimed to attract more talent. We have been many digital nomads, as we have assisted to their moving to Portugal. which was a very good contribution to the brain power that we have nowadays in Portugal. And at the same time, we invested a lot in our education system and in our public universities and polytechnics to make sure that we have also, for this year, we have the record ever of number of students in the universities. We have more than 50,000 students, which is very relevant, and it's a consistent investment in these areas. And we have, for the new initiatives we want to launch in the coming months, which is the e-residency 2.0, that we expect to compete directly with Estonia to capture this very important community of investors and entrepreneurs, that we expect to make it different. We call it 2.0 because it will be entirely virtual. We will not require the need to go to an embassy or to a consulate to be able to get the Portuguese virtual residency or identity. That is something that we're working on. And finally, we are creating this concept of free zone for technology, in which we expect to promote clusters of industries, in which we expect to have or to offer regulatory sandboxes that will be a very strong contribution to capture investment, to test, to experiment, and to develop new projects.
I see. So you're really focusing on finding the ways to get the right people to Portugal, but also then setting up the structures for them to do what they need to do. That's interesting in terms of obviously the pandemic at the moment. I think the broader societal and economic effects of the pandemic are yet to be measured. We're still not sure what they will mean for us, but what we are definitely seeing is that the expansion of remote working is letting people make changes to their quality of life and well-being in ways that they just couldn't before. So I think packed, speaking as someone who lives in London, packed commuting, expensive housing, cold winters, these are all factors that have been part and parcel of working in some of Europe's largest and most successful tech hubs. But so do you feel then that Portugal is well positioned to offer Europe's entrepreneurs who now have perhaps, and just tech workers, not just the founders, who have perhaps more flexibility? Can you offer them a different quality of life as well as opportunities to grow their business?
Yes, globally, I would say that Portugal offers a very interesting value proposition for this kind of entrepreneurs. We know that we are not only considered the third most peaceful country in the world, which is very relevant for people who appreciate stability and good quality of life, but at the same time, in terms of talent, of human resources, we have now a very interesting community that is able to fulfill the needs of international investors that are looking for our country to develop their projects and initiatives. There's also the fact that we've been working to capture significant events that help us to develop this bet on startups ecosystems, on this transition to this new model. I'm talking about, for example, the Web Summit, that we have managed to keep it in Portugal until 2028, and it was a very important landmark and a flagship initiative that has positioned Portugal in the map also for the startups ecosystem, and that's been showing quite successful bet from our government and from our community. We have a very strong startup ecosystem that has been growing consistently over the past years. It represents at this moment more than 1% of our GDP, and we expect to double it in the next coming 3 years. As I also mentioned, we have several initiatives that aims to support and accelerate this capturing and attraction of new investors.
There's a lot of real positives there, and I think the fact, as you pointed out, that Portugal's been working on this is not an overnight group of initiatives. This is something you've been working. We don't found tech hubs overnights in garages. We slowly build them through trial and error. But what are the key challenges for Portugal in terms of growing your digital economy? What are the big obstacles?
I would say that we need to be even more intentional on our strong belief that digital can play a very relevant role on our transition to a new model of economy. We know that digital and startups typically work in counter-cycle. Recent studies that we made in our startups community show that startups have been able to grow and take advantage of many opportunities even during the pandemic. And we know that the explanation for this counter-cycle effect results from the fact that these startups have invested a lot in terms of human resources, much more differentiated, and at the same time they have incorporated technology in their business models that makes these startups in terms of approach to the market much more resilient, and at the same time much more immune to the crisis. And this is something that was confirmed in this study. 42% of our startups mentioned that they have been able to accelerate and to grow during the pandemic crisis. But I believe that both Portugal and at the same time Europe, we share the same challenge and still faces some kind of difficulty in retaining the startups headquarters in Europe when they really want to grow. When they become bigger, when they want to reach the unicorn level, they typically tend to go to the US, to the United States, and this is something that we must try to revert, because we are basically draining many of our resources and our capacity and our capital to other continents instead of keeping them and retaining them in our country. So we consider that it's crucial as a country and as a continent, as European Union, that we are more intentional in the definition of and the creation of the conditions for a more stable and more clear ecosystem for startups, namely through what we consider a very important initiative that is aligned with Europe, that we call the European Startup Nation Standards, that basically defines the requirements for a real startup nation. In our case, we believe that we are in a very interesting stage in terms as a startup nation that we believe we already are. But it's important that as a whole, the Europe has this concern, ensuring that there is a minimum level of investment in this area in all countries and a very significant harmonization in terms of approach to startups ecosystem, because we still tend to see a very fragmented approach. When a startup wants to internationalize in Europe, they still need to deal with very different regimes, and this is not something that supports and accelerates the growth of these companies.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair point. We're getting better at creating great hubs for startups to get to a certain size. And how they grow and scale after that seems to be a separate problem, but actually they're totally connected. Scaling is an essential part of longevity of our startups. So that brings...
In our case, we have created a network of incubators that is aimed to somehow help on the increase in terms of maturity of our ecosystem. We have 160 incubators in the whole country, covering the entire territory, and they have been able to support each other and to have a combined approach. And I think this is something very relevant that we should also do at the European level. We need to promote the partnership between incubators from different countries, because that is something that will close the relationship and help the startups that want to enter into other markets from other countries.
I see. Well, that brings us nicely to, I suppose, the looking ahead part. On the 1st of January, Portugal is going to take over the presidency of the Council of the European Union for the first 6 months of the year. And while I know 6 months is not a very long time, it's a very important time in the calendar of the European Union. It's quite auspicious timing. It coincides with the release of and debate on some really large new files around Digital Services Act, artificial intelligence, data strategies. These are intended to be the new rules that will be the backbone of Europe's tech economy in the coming decades. So, the release of these rules for debate coincides with your leadership. With so many big files on the table, what will be the priority for the Portuguese presidency?
We want to focus on two different areas. First being to conclude and to accelerate the approval of these very significant legal instruments that you just mentioned, the Digital Services Act, the document on artificial intelligence and data strategy. Those are the dossiers and files that we want to accelerate and close if possible during our presidency. But I would like to highlight another area of focus that we believe it's crucial for the success of the approach of Europe in terms of international relevance, in terms of our position in the international and global market. We truly believe that Europe should reposition itself, taking advantage of something that I believe we haven't been able to sell internationally, which is the European way of doing business. We know that any market depends on the confidence, on trust. Consumers, companies need to trust, and we are in a certain moment in which trust can be somehow affected by so many news, so many concerns, so many areas in which some lack of regulation can mean some lack of also trust in this ecosystem. And Europe has been regarded and perceived as a continent that hasn't been able to be very effective and very innovative. And we believe that having this legacy of democratic values, of respect for individual rights, is something that when other countries look to Europe is something that is very relevant. And that can be also from an economic approach be regarded as something, a competitive advantage from Europe when compared to US or to China. We truly believe that our values, our democratic principles, our respect for individual rights can be our topic of and our most relevant competitive advantage when compared to these other markets. And so we want to promote a manifesto for a declaration, a Lisbon Declaration to be signed in Lisbon in June, that is supposed to somehow materialize this vision of a digital democracy with a purpose that is aimed to ensure that even in the digital era, even in a digital market, we still have a reference. We still want to make sure that people feel they can trust in this digital market, but we want to use this to open to other markets. We want to invite other non-European countries to come to Europe and understand that we are the trustful partner for them to make business in the digital era. And we want also this Lisbon Declaration to be subscribed by big tech companies that on a self-regulation approach also assume the commitment of aligning with these basic principles that are crucial for the confidence in this market. And this is something that we expect to have this great momentum that will happen in June. And it will also be associated with another very relevant momentum for Europe, which is the inauguration of a submarine cable that will link Europe and Latin America. And it will be also inaugurated together with the Digital Assembly in Lisbon. And it will somehow be a symbol of this direct connection, non-intermediate connection between Europe, Africa, and Latin America, creating this new platform for the South Atlantic, in which we believe that we should invest a lot more, because it's something that will be very crucial for a new cycle of cooperation, will be crucial for the emerging economies that need this support from the digital and are looking for Europe as their reference and their trustful partner that can support them in their digital transition.
You raised a lot of great points about, I suppose, community and supporting each other. So I thought your point about, tech hubs across Europe need to be more aligned and not just in country. It's about how do we connect them across countries. These are the practical ways that we can support businesses who want to stay and scale here and also attract ones from outside of Europe. I think we often focus on comparing ourselves in Europe with the US and China, and we have different ways of measuring how good we are or beating ourselves up for where we're lacking and falling behind. So on my final question, and we've, I think, just 2 more minutes, is what do you see as success for Europe on a global tech scale? How will we measure our success? Is it by the number of unicorns, IPOs? If you don't mind answering in a kind of a short answer, very big question. How do you think we should measure our success here on the digital front?
Okay, there are different approaches to that. Obviously, the percentage of GDP, we can consider the number of jobs that we create with this digital economy. The number of startups is also a very good sign of how the vitality of our ecosystem and our economy. But above all, I would like that European, I truly believe in this, we must sell Europe or reposition Europe as the trustful partner. We have a very important legacy of respect for individual rights that is crucial for the trust that all the consumers, all the companies need to have in this digital market. And this is something that we really would like to emphasize and to contribute to accelerate to this new cycle of cooperation and in international economic relations between Europe and other continents, in which the digital is the base of this new economy.
That's you.
Why we, thank you.
Well, look, thank you for your time. And I think we all wish Portugal the very best of success with its presidency. As we said, it's a really interesting and important time in terms of public policy supporting Europe startups. So I would like to hand over to Wojtek for the closing remarks. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you very much, Linda. Thank you very much for your time and for your questions.
So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining. We had about 3,000 people join from 50 different countries. And it's been a fantastic discussions from Thursday and Friday. My name is Wojtek. I work at Index Ventures and I'm one of the coordinators of the Not Optional campaign. And what I wanted to share with you is a little bit why we started Not Optional and why it is even called Not Optional. It is because when you travel across Europe, it's not that you encounter lack of enthusiasm and lack of support or will towards startups and to wanting to build more European tech giants. However, it's not always a priority. It's not always seen as urgent. And that's what we try to bring to this. We try to make sure that policymakers see that there are no 5 ways about building the economy of the future to benefit from the job growth, the innovation that it will bring. There is really only one way. And that is to support the young, unproven businesses, the founders that are starting them and helping them scale. So I hope this conversation was insightful. We made some news, as you heard from the German Finance Ministry. Germany will shortly in a matter of days announce new stock option policy. We heard that Latvia is working on theirs, Netherlands as well. And we know that the European Union and the European Commission will, during the Portuguese presidency, announce the Startup Nation standard. So there is definitely building momentum and we need to continue it. So please, if we can help you and support you in local countries, let us know. We'll be very pleased to do that. I know that there is a lot of efforts happening by startup associations, some of them who've joined us today, by founders who are very passionate about this. But it is only if our voice is heard all across Europe that we'll be able to make Europe the most entrepreneurial continent. I want to thank Slash, who has been an extremely supportive organization for Not Optional and has helped us co-host this event. The fantastic nonprofit run by students from Finland, and I hope we get to go yet again to Helsinki next year. I also want to thank all the speakers. We had ministers with founders, startup executives, members of startup associations, all coming together in a way that I don't think we've previously been able to do. Maybe that is one silver lining of these virtual events, that we can bring all these stakeholders together. I also want to thank our production company, Kinura, Emma Williamson on the logistics of the events, my colleagues Avron and Haley. But mostly I want to thank all of you who have joined in, participated. We will be posting all these sessions live, so you can rewatch them if you missed anything. Thanks again, and hopefully we'll see you soon.